So Margot, I would like to start with you because in 2019, you led a panel at the London Book Fair in which you presented 5 predictions for 2025 related, of course, to the book industry. In those 5 points, you said that the book industry would become more diverse, both in its publication and its workforce, that the publishers in 2025 should take more risks publishing books that represented marginalized people. You talked about diversity, decentralizations. You talk about the publishers would focus even more in the final consumer and talking about creating events with readers in mind. And finally, you said that the publisher should publish books in different formats and diversify the incoming. So we haven't even reached 2025 yet, but I believe that the COVID-19 pandemic accelerated those predictions. All this quick to hear what are these predictions. What have you talked about our markets for the next years?
Yeah, I was reviewing those predictions the other day, and I didn't predict the COVID-19 pandemic, but you're right. A lot of what I did was certainly accelerated by the challenges that the pandemic brought. And I think that it has forced the book publishing industry to innovate quite quickly. And I think publishers were very creative and really did focus on connecting with readers during the pandemic. And I think that we all saw huge benefits to it, both in terms of reader connection and revitalization and increase in book sales. So I hope that the lessons that we'll take from this, that we do need experimenting and just always keep that focus on the fundamentals of our business of introducing stories and great information to people who want to find it. I think that's the fundamentals of what we do. The thing that I think is going to be the biggest opportunity for our business in the next couple of years is going to be the finances. I think pay equity for both writers and staff is hugely important. And I know that this is something that the US is really grappling with. We have had a bunch of economic recoveries over the past couple decades that have unfairly shifted quite a lot of money to the top. Now, I wouldn't say that anybody in book publishing from the bottom to the top is making a huge amount of money. However, all of these stories have come out about big 4 publishers making record profits, and staff members are not seeing that reflected in their paychecks. And most of them are still in very expensive cities. And writers are really struggling to make ends meet and keeping day jobs or, doing other things. So I think that the industry needs to take a really hard look at itself and figure out, how do we share the gains that we're making more equitably around the industry? And also, how do we make this industry work financially? Because I think that there is sometimes this view that money is incidental in book publishing, and that just cannot be true if we want it to be a vibrant, exciting, sustainable place to work and share stories.
Boos, what do you think about that? Do you agree?
I do agree, sort of. Earlier this year, we had a similar discussion here at Frankfurt. Actually, we started this discussion right after Frankfurt last year in October. And we said, what should occupy us in the next few years? So we decided for the next 3 years, we're going to focus on translations. So translate is important, transfer what's happening, and transform. There, I'm very close to Margot, what she's been saying. I think we have to transform our industry somehow. And we have to review, especially, I think somehow it's always about money. But on the other hand, we have to discuss again the role of the editor, because I think this is the most important role we do have in our industry. and we left our activities actually to scouts, to agents. And actually the role of the publisher, as I've learned it 40 years ago, it's about creating content, identifying content, being very close to the reader and being as close to the author. Yeah. And yes, we have to pay authors, we have to pay actually everybody in our industry, because I think there's a lot of passion in our, and the money we are paying is not reflecting this passion. So yes, it's about transformation, and transformation means to be closer to the communities. We have to think of the books. As long as I see that in the United States, we still have very few translations from other languages. Yeah, everybody is relying on the bestsellers coming out of the country itself, but actually I think we have to listen to new voices, to smaller communities. We have to become more diverse, and that's what has to happen in the next 3 years in publishing.
I actually really agree with what you're saying, and I think that there's definitely in the US, but probably too, there's become this empathy crisis, and people are not able to put themselves into others' shoes. And I think that that is a role that publishing, reading, and translating can help to play. So I absolutely agree that bringing more stories, more information across borders will help us have a more global and universally human mindset.
Yeah, I like this idea of an empathy crisis. Look into society. Now we're seeing this war here in Europe, the Ukraine. It's not a conflict anymore, actually. It's a war. What's happening? So yes, indeed, we are in an empathy crisis, and how to overcome this is actually we have to listen a lot more. But actually, where do you think does this come from? Does it come from consolidation in our industry? The larger, the better, or where does this crisis come from, actually?
Yeah, today I received the news about the Frankfurt edition, the book fair this year, and you highlighted the translators' diversity and the plurality in this publishing market. Is that it? This will be the main focus? Because the previous years was the audio, and all the things related to that.
Yeah. Einerseits now going back to German. On the one hand, actually, it's about diversity. Yes, that's true. But actually, we have to use all the channels which are available. And if you're seeing that audio plays a big role to reach out to people who haven't read in the past, to transport this diversity, we have to use these channels like audio. Or podcasts are getting more and more important here in Europe. Yeah, there's not a publisher without using many podcasts, and we leave it sometimes to the authors, and that publishers have to create a lot more what's out there. If you think of Twitter, you have everything, all kinds of, I don't know whether it's actually information, it's opinions. And I think we have to leave opinions behind and get back to either new ideas and to label them as well as new ideas. And nobody has the truth. Nobody owns the truth, especially not publishers. If I read a book, if I listen to a podcast, if I listen to an audiobook, I create my own world. And I think this is the important thing right now. Listen to each other, use all the channels, make diversity visible.
And continuing this forward-thinking exercise, what's your predictions? What predictions would you make for the book industry in 2030, Boos?
Looking back a bit, it's publishing has been the most stable industry actually in the world. Yeah, population has been growing all over, so actually our market has been growing. And even in the pandemic, if I talk to colleagues in Spain or in Italy, we are seeing growth in the book market, and we are seeing growth with young adults, especially, which I think is very important. So I do believe that the new channels we've been using, actually during the pandemic, bookstores have been closed, libraries have been closed, but the kids used every available internet channel to get information. And this helped publishing again. So we shouldn't be scared of the future. And I think in 2030, we're going to see a lot more people reading, actually, whether it's in print or whether it's digital, doesn't matter. It's all about the stories we are telling. And it's about the people which are behind the stories, which brings me back to the authors. The role of the author is an important one. I was talking to a prominent publisher from the UK recently, Richard Charkin, and he's been telling me we shouldn't forget who our customer is. In his opinion, the customer is the author, not the reader. We first have to listen to the ideas, the stories which are around, and then we have to publish these stories. And maybe that's one approach, but again, it brings us back to the community and listening to the community.
Margot, you are the executive director and publisher of the Feminist Press. First of all, I want to know how exciting is that? And I want to know for you that how do you see the rate participation of women in the publishing industry? Do you think that the greater female role might also be something that we are prominently in a few years?
I am absolutely thrilled to be the new executive director and publisher of Feminist Press. For 8 years, I worked at Kickstarter as the head of publishing and then the director of the overall creative outreach team. So I did a lot of work around helping to fund the arts and spoke to thousands of writers, publishers, journalists, and more. And that was such a phenomenal role to get to play to help get money for books, but also to hear the excitement and the innovation and the challenges from so many people around the industry, both in the US and around the world. I can't even tell you what a joy that was for me. But returning to book publishing feels like coming home. I didn't necessarily think that I would get to play this kind of role at a book publisher again. And I've just been happy to wake up and go to work every day or open my laptop, as the case may be. Publishing is a very interesting field. In the US, it's majority female. But if you look at some of the surveys that Publishers Weekly have done, as you go up in the industry to higher pay scales and higher authority, it gets more male, more white, more straight, more cis, more abled. And so you have an industry where the fairly underpaid workforce is primarily female. And then as you get to the money and the power and the decision making, it gets a lot more male and white and straight. And so I think these are things that I'd like to push on quite a lot through my role and through advocacy. And I don't think any of these are problems that you solve overnight. A lot of them are systemic and societal problems. But I guess to me, every problem eventually comes back to money. And I think that if the industry were paid better, you might see some of these problems shaking out a little bit. I think more people from more broadly diverse backgrounds could afford to work in publishing if they had student loans, if they had caretaking responsibilities. And right now, historically through my career, I think the folks who come into publishing are people who can afford to come into publishing. I love working for the Feminist Press because our mission, our vision is to help create a world where everyone sees themselves reflected in books. And I think that is such a great dream for the world. It's something I didn't have when I was growing up. And I really want to help change that for the next generation. And we specifically focus on publishing marginalized and insurgent writers. And that is not just US-based writers. The founder of Feminist Press 52 years ago, Florence Howe, really envisioned Feminist Press as a place for global feminisms. So translation has been part of our mission from the very beginning. And our senior editor, Lauren Hook, has done a phenomenal job increasing the number of translations on our list from, I think, 1 a year to 2 to 4 a year, which doesn't sound like much, but if you do a dozen books a year, that's quite a bigger proportion. And she's also worked to bring in works translated from languages that we weren't seeing before. So we've just acquired a book by a Kuwaiti Palestinian writer. We've been publishing from Brazil, from Korea, all around the world, whereas I think a decade or two ago, a lot of our translations tended to be more from like Europe. So I'm just so impressed with the work that the press has done in the year before I got here.
So Margot, do you think we are on the right track already, since we're seeing more diversity in the titles which are published, since we're seeing more diversity in the authors? Or do we need like a quota that at least 50% of the titles published in every publishing house ought to be from non-male white people?
I think publishing has taken a big step in the right direction, but the problem is so entrenched. I think in the US, the number is something like 75% of the publishing workforce is white, and that does not reflect the diversity of our country. And when the editors who acquire books are white, when the publicists who support them, when the marketers who support them, when the sales folks who sell them in, and when many of the booksellers who hand them to readers, when all of those folks are white, no ill intent, there's a lack of understanding of the types of stories that might speak to people who are not white, for example. So I think a quota wouldn't solve the problem, because the problem is that the industry throughout every stage of the process needs to be more reflective of the world we live in. And then writers who are writing from different perspectives, from marginalized identities, will be better supported by people who understand what they're saying. And we'll be better able as an industry to reach readers who maybe have not seen themselves in books. And that is both a public good and a market increase, because I think publishing in the US compared to other entertainment industries is just a small fraction of market size. And I think it's because we haven't done an amazing job of speaking to everyone and making the case for books.
I always thought of publishing as a reflection, as a mirror, actually, of what's happening, of the state of society. So if we see baby steps in society, we're probably going to see them in publishing. But on the other hand, I understand that you're saying we need to transform publishing ourselves to make an impact, to have an impact. And I was wondering, we here in Germany do have an award for women's writers from Africa, Latin America, and Asia. Yeah, and as far as I know, that's the only award. There's the Orange Prize years ago, which focused on female writers, actually. So isn't what I wanted to ask, isn't it also we should emphasize or put more effort into marketing and maybe have more awards which focus on diversity to make a lot more writers visible?
I think that that's absolutely one step that we could take in the right direction. But I think that we have to take steps everywhere along the way. And I agree that publish a mirror for society, but how big is that mirror and where are we holding it?
Yeah, when I started in publishing many years ago, I come from a bookseller's family. And I asked my uncle, because I wanted to work with books, and he told me, never ever become a bookseller, become a publisher. That's where the money is. which brings us back to where we started, that publishing does very well. So we always seem to live because passionate about books, that we have to suffer somehow. And actually we have to change mindset belonging to, if you're in culture, you're never going to make any money. Yeah, we have to change that mindset as well.
I agree. And I think Europe has done quite a better job than we have in the US of public funding for the arts. I think the UK, Germany, a lot of them have a lot more public funding. And so by committing public funds, you say, as we value these things and we want to pay for them. In the US, every year, some Republican congressperson is trying to slash the NEA, which is the National Endowment for the Arts. It's such a tiny, tiny, tiny sliver of our budget, but it represents so much money and potential for arts. So what we're saying again and again is we don't value the arts. We don't want to pay for them. We value bombs and the military and policing much more than we value culture that might change someone's whole world.
Yeah, or the first budget cuts you usually see, it's in the field of art, as saying. I'm seeing major budget cuts now here in Germany for translation fund, which is very dear to my heart because I believe translations are so important. But this was the first thing in the past few months which has been cut by several institutions, governments, foreign office, whatever. And that's really is a big issue. And when I'm seeing that all Institut Français, Cervantes Institute, everybody is running out of money right now. So, but this means I'm complaining, yeah, but we need to change this somehow. And yes, arts cannot survive without public funding. You're right, completely. Yeah, as a book fair, I know that we need some sponsoring. We need to reach out to people. And if you look how many money goes into how we are competing with music festivals, which get quite some good funding here in Germany, especially if it's classical music. And if you run a literature festival, it's very literature festival in my hometown, which has to survive on a few thousand euros, which is impossible if you have to invite writers. So how do we increase the value of books, of authors?
It's something I think about a lot. And I think the answer lies in what we actually do, which is storytelling. I think that we use our ability to tell a story and to convince a reader that a reader is phenomenal. We need to turn that outward to society in general and show the value of books and literature. And I think that it's something that's a little less immediate, but it's something that we have to commit to as a field in an ongoing way. And in the US, we have some advocacy organizations like the National Book Foundation, and their whole mission is around helping to increase leadership in the US. So I think that partnering more closely with organizations like that, trade organizations like Council of Literary Magazines and Presses and American Booksellers Association and things like that, I think all of us need to make the case for literature part of the drumbeat of our work, not just the case for the specific books we're publishing.
In the past 2 years, a lot of prominent people from the US actually starting book clubs or starting promoting the power of reading, but I don't see actually any results. Everybody's talking about it, that books are important, but nothing's really happening. But Talita, what's happening in Brazil actually? What's the situation with you?
Yeah, in Brazil we have a lot of new bookstores. We, especially in São Paulo, the new bookstores is something that is happening here. And of course, we are struggling with financial reasons, because I guess it's a global issue. But I really want to ask you about you too. What do you think about the Brazilian market? And do you think it reflects our democracy, our society?
I haven't been to Brazil in a few years, but I used to travel before pandemic at least once a year to Brazil and meet publishers and booksellers as well. And I know that the two major chains are really struggling. But you saying, on the other hand, there's a lot of new bookstores opening. Last time I went to São Paulo, I actually met 2 or 3 independent publishers who just started their business. And they were very, very active, yeah. Especially not only publishing the books, but actually having little literature festivals, doing a lot of activities, reading, not only physically, but also virtual. And I think that's what it's about. I think the time of the bookstores and the malls are over. Yeah, we need a lot of smaller bookstores who are sort of community books, the suburbs. Yeah, and this is what I'm seeing in Brazil, and that's what you mentioned. And I'm seeing it. I mentioned Spain and Italy. And that's where I'm seeing it. Yeah, there are bookstores always combined with a coffee store. And actually, I just talked to Feltrinelli in Italy, and he was telling me that actually he started off as having coffee shops and restaurants in his bookstores, but now he's reducing the coffee shops again and having more space for books, which is a good actually. And if this is happening in Brazil, and the publishers have too, they came quite well through the pandemic in Brazil, but you must have better numbers than I have.
Yeah, and we see a lot about these new bookstores combined with coffee shops, and they want to create a new community in their in their neighborhoods. And for example, we have a new bookstores that only sells female books. The other one is only related to national books. So it's quite a fresh air, something really good that is happening here.
It looks like sometimes if a nation or state is in a crisis, actually publishing does have quite a good time, yeah. So that's a relation I always found looking backwards.
What's the focus of the Sao Paulo Book Festival this year, Talita?
Oh, the focus will be in the young adults. We have national writers, and about I guess the main theme will be diversity, because we want to highlight the new authors and what they are talking about. Some marginalized people, young readers, LGBTQ teens, and all this kind of diversity, because it's really important for us. And Boos, you said about the new festivals and literary festivals in small cities. We have this in Brazil a lot. And we are looking forward for Bienal de São Paulo, this book fair, because people really want to meet in person again. So we have the better expectations for this edition. So, and I want to do another question about it, because Boos, you have faced a lot of challenges in recent years in front of the Frankfurt Book Fair, and you had a new in-person edition in 2021. I guess it's too shy compared to the previous one. So, how can you combine the good results and feedbacks that you had in the virtual edition to this new in-person one this year?
I still do believe, after having had in 2020 a virtual-only book fair, which was quite a depressing experience, actually, not seeing people. And last year we had a smaller book fair. It was the 3rd of 2019, in person. Everybody was very happy, and a lot of people to come to Frankfurt. And then we could bring in our digital experience from the previous year. So actually digital does support physical book fairs. It doesn't replace them. So these digital tools are not going to go away. We are going to have our conferences, not during the book fair days, but before the book fair, so people can attend virtually. Some formats did work out very well, some formats didn't. But when you mentioned São Paulo Book Fair and Book Festival, and that you reaching out to a lot of, let's say, about national authors. I think if you look into the book fair, book festival circus, you see the same authors all over the world. I think, again, we have to focus on people which are closer to us, which are closer to our communities, the communities you mentioned. And there digital can help. We can bring in important people we can have Salman Rushdie speaking in Sao Paulo virtually, but we should really focus on the physical meeting between, let's say, Brazilian authors and their readers. Yeah, I just got back from Abu Dhabi, and I think we don't need another international book fair where I'm going to meet the same people. I have to make the national authors visible who don't have a stage right now because there's communities too small. So virtual digital is going to stay. It helps us actually. But again, we need a change of minds. We need to strengthen our own authors, marginalized voices. And the next step, we can try to make them international, yeah, to promote them internationally. But first, we have to have a success story national.
Yeah, step by step.
It's such an exciting vision for the role that book fairs can play. And I agree. I think sometimes certain authors who have already achieved quite a high level of success have the financial support they need to go to different events. But using these different platforms, these different festivals as platforms for the authors who are domestic, can expose them to an international audience in a way that I think will be such a more multifaceted world literature. I can't wait to see how your vision plays out.
Yeah, I think we have to bring these big brands, yeah, the most important authors together with our, as you said, domestic authors. Yeah? We need to use all channels. We need to use the most prominent authors to promote domestic authors. Yeah, so it's a combination of things.
And book fairs does that a lot. You know, it's so important. Each country.
Yeah, and we should look beyond our own borders. Yeah, which means I think we should musicians. We should look into theater people. I think we should look into film people. Yeah, because you can tell stories many ways. We shouldn't restrict ourselves to a traditional author. Yeah, I think we have to look into other fields of culture, actually, to how they promote, how they reach out, and even use book talk to reach out to the readers if they are. That's where they are. Yeah.
I love that idea. And it's something that I saw when I was the head of publishing. I oversaw journalism and comics as well. And it feels the field of book publishing and the field of comics publishing, they're so close, but they're so different. And comics has solved a lot of problems that publishing, that prose book publishing is still struggling with, and vice versa. And I think that those two fields can learn so much about how to create reader excitement, how to make a big splashy moment, how to get people to pre-order. All are solved by the comics industry. But in terms of sales, distribution, marketing, traditional trade book publishing has that in a way that comics is only now just starting to tiptoe into. So I think you're right, pulling the best of what other fields are doing and cross-pollinating, I think will lead to a much more successful, robust book publishing industry.
Yeah, I think we're not too far from each other, actually. And since you mentioned comics, if you look at the Comic-Con in San Diego, yeah, how these people reach out to their communities and they bring all these Marvel stars, movie actors into the Comic-Con, and I think we need to do that as well. Yeah, most films are coming from books. Yeah, so actually we should capitalize on the outreach of the
main role about this our excitement. How do you see do you think that our market will increase? Do you think that we will take some time to make the things right and about the sales and everything?
I think everything has been mentioned somehow before. Actually, we have to think about the wages of the people. Yeah, we really have to rethink this. I think we should let the editors get away from the bestseller lists and to curate their own programs. I think we should strengthen the role of the curators. We have to get better funding for translation, where I think that's a role for government as well to step in. Yeah, since translations are so important. I think publishers should work a lot closer with bookstores. Yeah, not only with Amazon and digital, which are actually distributors, not bookstores, because bookstores actually have a more of a quality function. They have to select the titles they want to present. They have to focus a lot more. So I think we have to work a lot more with physical bookstores and maybe other sales outlets as well. I think we have to go to more festivals. We have to travel a lot more post-pandemic. Also, I do believe that the pandemic doesn't go away. Yeah, sort of a pandemic will stay somehow. But we have to be aware that we have to do a lot of more diverse things to reach out to more diverse people. Be more focused.
Yeah, your answer was better than my question. You totally get it.
Okay, thank you. Obrigado.
De nada.
I think that's a fantastic vision. And what I'm hoping to see, I guess my hopes are fairly modest in the medium term. I hope that we're able to sustain the gains in sales levels that we got to during the pandemic, that the pandemic got people back into the habit of reading and buying books a little more. And that will give us the breathing room that we need to make some of these changes around wages, around looking at the myriad different things people tried during the pandemic and then figuring out what worked and what didn't, so that we can pull the best practices of this like chaotic, splash into digital. Like we can pull the best of what we did and bring that really intentionally into what we do, and then also continue to invest in things like our direct channels, like website, like the podcasts you were mentioning, like more translations, more support for editors and writers. But I think that's not a sexy answer of like taking time to get our house in order. But I think strategically investing and making a vision for what does the world look like in publishing in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, that's going to take us where we need to go. Because I've felt like for so many years, publishing in a very reactive state. Things happen to us. Amazon introduced the e-reader, and that changed the industry, and it felt like a crisis. I think we have a unique moment where like we could take a breath outside of a crisis, and be really intentional about what happens next and driving our industry forward.
Yeah, but it does not only need to come out of our industry. I think we need to lobby a lot. What you mentioned in the beginning, what we do have in Germany here is, by the way, we have fixed prices for the books all over. So there's no price competition in the market, which actually helps Amazon as well because it protects their margin. On the other hand, it really does help our industry. We have reduced VAT on books. Yeah, we have hundreds, thousands of book awards, which actually help authors. So it's also about the structure, and I think we need more awareness in our governments, actually, that publishing is not an industry, but it's the cultural sector as well, as important as theater. Yeah, there's a lot of money in Germany going into the film industry to be competitive, but actually we need the same money to go into book publishing, into translations, to have a healthy market here. So we can produce, which only might find like 2 readers or maybe 500 readers, but there's a niche market for it. So we need some sort of a legal framework. We need support. We need, again, more lobby.
Yeah, here in Brazil, we are still struggling with this rule about prices, the book prices, to fight equally with Amazon and everything. but for us, it's difficult to, to advance in this team.
Yeah, there are so many things we have to do. Actually, we have to protect copyright. There's still a lot of piracy,
Exactly.
especially in the digital sector, as well as in the school and textbook market. Yeah, there's a lot of piracy. Scientific texts, so there's a lot of things we have to do, and actually this. And as Margot was saying, we have to learn from each other. It's very important. If something works in one market, maybe it's a model for the other market. So actually, we shouldn't be in a competition, but we have to support each other.
And I absolutely think that that is one of the roles that these international book festivals and fairs can play going forward, is giving us space to learn from each other and take something that's working in Germany and bring it back to the US. Take something that's working in the US and bring it to Brazil and vice versa.
Well, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation. I think we have a lot of problems and things to fix it, but we'll have a lot of good ideas to put into practice. And you two helped a lot with a lot of them. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. It's amazing conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much. And as long as we have so passionate people as the two of you in our industry, I'm not scared of what's going to happen. And I hope to see you in person one day. So
yeah,
me too. I'm looking forward for Frankfurt edition this year.
Yeah, I'm very much hoping that I can be there.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Thank you both. Ciao.